In the spring of 2022, as relentless enemy attacks depleted Ukraine's tank reserves, a few domestically produced main battle tanks emerged from the shadows. Constructed at the turn of the century, the colossal war machines had patiently awaited their reckoning for over 2 decades. With impenetrable armor, formidable firepower, and advanced targeting systems, these tanks became the nation's final bastion in the face of insurmountable challenges. Standing tall, the T-84 Oplot main battle tank prepared to unleash devastating fury upon its adversaries, who were blindsided by the unexpected. A dormant weapon that was resurrected to relieve its homeland from the clutches of its former motherland. When the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, dissolved at the end of 1991, newly formed Ukraine, with vast territory, rich resources, and a significant military-industrial complex, inherited the Mobilization factory in Kharkiv, a historical hub of tank production, and with it, the manufacturing capabilities to produce the Soviet T-80UD main battle tank. As this new sovereign nation navigated a new, uncertain path towards independence, its leaders sought to break away and differentiate themselves from its Soviet past, particularly in military technology. This drive for distinction led to the development of the T-84 Oplot main battle tank, a wholly indigenous design. The next-generation battle machine measures 23 feet in length, nearly 11 feet in width, and ascends to close to 9 feet in height. Despite its enormous weight of 53 short tons, the tank excels in speed and agility, carrying a 3-person crew with a maximum speed of 43.5 miles per hour on-road and around 28 off-road. Moreover, strength and speed can coexist within the tank thanks to its 6TD2 diesel engine with 1,200 horsepower. Despite inheriting some design elements from its Soviet predecessor, the T-84 Oplot boasts notable technological upgrades. The tank is protected by an enhanced explosive reactive armor package known as Contact 5, which significantly weakens the penetrating power of armor-piercing rounds and other battlefield threats. Another protective layer is the Stora-1 optical electronic countermeasure complex, which interferes with the lasers and infrared systems of incoming missiles. Furthermore, the T-84 also includes smokescreen laying technology, infrared jamming technology, and laser warning sensors for well-rounded defenses. The T-84 Oplot's offensive capabilities act as a balance to its impressive defenses. With a 125mm KBA-3 smoothbore gun, the heart of the tank's offensive system, the tank can unleash a variety of ammunition, including high-explosive anti-tank and armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot rounds, and can even launch anti-tank guided missiles. In addition to the main gun, the T-84 Oplot's arsenal is further bolstered with a 7.62mm anti-aircraft machine gun and a 12.7mm anti-aircraft machine gun. This diverse weaponry makes the Ukrainian main battle tank a versatile adversary against a variety of targets, from ground troops to low-flying aircraft. The tank's destructive potential is refined by advanced targeting technologies, including the 1G46 gunner's sight, equipped with cutting-edge thermal imaging and laser range-finding capabilities. Other technologies include an auxiliary power unit, a command and control system, and the option to fit 2 different types of tracks. Despite its impressive design and capabilities, as the pages of Ukrainian history turned, the T-84 Oplot faced challenges that threatened its existence almost from the start. The first prototype emerged from the production facilities in 1994. That same year, officials ordered the construction of several more metallic beasts. For months, these initial tanks underwent rigorous company and army trials, testing not just the potential of the vehicles, but the capabilities of Ukrainian production facilities as a whole. In 1999, with tests complete, the T-84 entered service with the Ukrainian army. For the next couple of years, the government, following through on its commitment to bolster the new country's defenses, ordered the delivery of a total of 10 of the type, delivered through the next couple of years. However, even as the promising T-84 began to fill the ranks, the Mobilization factory struggled to keep the lines active. Simultaneously, the Oplot tank faced another peculiar problem. It was seemingly unnecessary, as hundreds of older functional T-64 tanks inherited by Ukraine sent the replacement tank to the lowest of priorities. With the Ukrainian economy struggling financially, army officials needed help with the upkeep of the 10 available tanks. In the 2000s, 4 T-84 Oplots were sold to the United States for evaluation, further reducing the already limited fleet. With this, the T-84 seemed destined for obscurity as the years passed, a formidable force gathering dust in a Ukrainian warehouse. According to the International Institute for Strategic Studies' annual military balance guide of 2021, a mere 5 T-84 Oplots remained in Ukraine's inventory that year. In February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, unleashing a devastating military offensive. In the face of adversity, the T-84 would finally prove its worth. During the first 3 months of the conflict, Ukrainian forces lost almost 200 of their T-64, T-72, and T-80 tanks, a severe blow to their pre-war inventory of around 860 tanks. As a result, every single combat-ready vehicle, including the T-84 main battle tanks, was mobilized for frontline service. Even the United States returned their Oplots, reuniting the 10 models after almost 20 years. The tanks have since been updated with the latest technology, including a radio, a new generation 1B5282 ballistic computer, a land navigation system, and other features. Rumors circulate that at least one T-84 was deployed with the 3rd Tank Brigade in Donbas, near Barvinkove and Slovyansk. The other precious Oplots are believed to be assigned to the 14th Separate Mechanized Brigade, which had divided battalions between the southern and eastern fronts, with the tanks serving with the latter, where fighting was brutal. After retreating from northern Ukraine in the spring and stalling out in the south, the Russian army began concentrating many of its best remaining battalions to create a fresh new offensive in the Donbas region. The objective was to target a specific area where Ukrainian troops held the line, stretching from Slovyansk in the west to Severodonetsk in the east and along the Donets River. Over 2 weeks, the Russian forces relentlessly pushed forward, making gradual advances both north and south from the edges of the defensive position, aiming to encircle and isolate the Ukrainian garrison in eastern Severodonetsk. With no time to lose under all that pressure, the Ukrainian army has been throwing every available soldier and working vehicle into the fight, including a platoon of T-84 tanks. However, the Oplots were not the only forgotten giant brought back for this fight, with the Russians having to dive deep into their tank reserves. On May 13, 2023, Ukraine's Minister of Defense, Alexei Reznikov, announced that they would be ordering an undefined number of T-84 Oplot tanks from Ukroboronprom, the country's state-owned weapons manufacturer. Reznikov, a driving force behind the campaign for NATO-grade main battle tanks for the Ukrainian army, shared his thoughts after personally experiencing the Oplot's capabilities. In his own words, quote, "It's always nice to test drive equipment that's going to the front. But when it's Ukrainian equipment, it's many times more pleasant. I am convinced that there should be a Ukrainian tank, such as the Ukrainian Oplot tank, in the first ranks of the tank coalition." With this resurgence of faith, the T-84 Oplot is poised to take center stage in Ukraine's ongoing defense strategy, and this announcement seals the Oplot's journey from an almost forgotten relic to a symbol of Ukraine's tenacity and resolve. They were supposed to be for armed reconnaissance, but as Operation Desert Storm commenced, the French AMX-10 RC, also known as Reconnaissance, found itself in front of a storm. Leading the charge at over 80 kilometers per hour, the armored fighting vehicles unleashed their coaxial 7.62mm guns to swiftly eliminate approaching enemy fighters, while their powerful 105mm cannons dispatched tanks from 2,000 meters away. By the time the first wave of assault concluded, 20 Iraqi vehicles were destroyed, and over 3,000 enemies had surrendered. Remarkably, no AMX-10 had received a single scratch. And now, perhaps even more remarkably, these massive French guns have just been spotted on the front lines in Ukraine. During the post-war, the French army introduced the Panhard EBR, or Engin Blindé de Reconnaissance, an armored reconnaissance vehicle for use in French colonies and a possible USSR offensive in Western Germany. Over 1,200 Panhards were produced and used between 1950 and the late 1960s, when the vehicle began to show its age. Consequently, the French army sought a replacement in 1970. Preliminary studies for a replacement began at the AMX, or Ateliers de Construction d'Issy-les-Moulineaux. The result of the ongoing tests was the development of the AMX-10 platform, whose purpose was to be used not just to replace the Panhard, but also for the AMX VCI light tank. The initial prototypes of both replacements began in the mid-1970s. The wheeled vehicle was designated AMX-10 Roue Canon, or RC, meaning wheeled gun. The AMX-10 RC was introduced in 1981 and considered a char, or tank, under French military standards. The first French unit to receive the vehicles was the 2nd Régiment de Hussards in Sordoun. The AMX-10 RC had a length of 30 feet, a width of 9 feet, and a height of 8 feet. It had a mass of 16 tons. Years of meticulous study led to an innovative 6x6 wheeled vehicle with hydropneumatic suspension, allowing the AMX-10 RC to traverse rough terrain relatively easily. The driver could change the ground clearance between 20 and 60 centimeters. The suspension could also be used to tilt the vehicle forward, backward, or to the side to bolster its versatility in different types of landscapes. The AMX-10 RC was skid-steered and lacked a steering wheel. It operated similarly to a tank and could perform pivot turns. The first batch of the 6x6 wheeled vehicle was powered by the Hispano-Suiza HS-115-2, a multi-fuel, liquid-cooled, supercharged V8 engine, providing over 250 horsepower, but was upgraded in 1985 with the Bedouin 6F11 SRX supercharged diesel engine with 300 horsepower. The AMX-10 RC, a maximum speed of over 80 kilometers per hour on-road and 40 kilometers off-road. It had an operational range of 800 kilometers. 2 water jets mounted on the rear side of the hull were used for water propulsion, making the vehicle amphibious. The AMX-10 RC could traverse bodies of water with an average speed of 7.2 kilometers per hour. Regarding armament, the vehicle was equipped with a 105-47 F2 Mecha 105mm gun. The turret was made of welded aluminum. The vehicle was armed with a 7.62mm machine gun and 2 electrically operated smoke grenade launchers. The standard arsenal included 4,000 machine gun rounds, 38 gun rounds, and 16 smoke grenade launchers. The powerful F2 rifled gun can fire high-explosive anti-tank rounds, armor-piercing, fin-stabilized discarding salvo ammunition, and smoke rounds. The crew comprises 4 men: driver, commander, gunner, and loader. Both driver and commander have access to several periscopes and telescopes. In the early 1990s, the French military decided to modernize the AMX-10 RC by improving its armor, gun, and electronics, but the program did not take off until the early 2000s. The result was the AMX-10 RCR Rénové. It encompassed the SIT-6 battlefield management system, the Lyre infrared missile jammer, thermal cameras for the commander and gunner, an armor package for increased protection, and an upgraded gun. The upgrade led to increased weight and eliminated the vehicle's amphibious nature, leading to the removal of the water jets. The entire AMX-10 RCR fleet was finalized in 2010. Since its introduction, the AMX-10 RC has featured several variants. The first was the RP, an APC, or armored personnel carrier of the AMX-10 RC that could house 8 men. The RTT was also an APC prototype, fitted with a 25mm cannon, but was never mass-produced. AMX also experimented with a AA variant with 2 30mm autocannons, but failed to attract attention from customers. Other variants employed different turrets with different machine guns and launchers, but never went beyond a testing phase. One of the first combat deployments of the AMX-10 RC was the 1983 French military intervention in Chad as part of Operation Manta. Others later participated in United Nations operations in Kosovo. The highlight of the AMX-10's career was Operation Desert Storm, where 96 of the French vehicles were deployed. They engaged the Iraqi 45th Infantry Division before capturing As Salman airfield. During the engagement, the AMX-10 surrendered over 3,000 enemy soldiers, with over 20 vehicles destroyed at the cost of 0 losses. Following American intervention in the Middle East, some AMX-10s were deployed to Afghanistan with French infantry units, but rarely saw action. On January 14, 2023, the French Minister of Defense, Sébastien Lecornu, announced his country would prepare the delivery of a batch of AMX-10 RC vehicles to the Ukrainian military. The minister specified the order would take place within 2 months at the very least. Unlike the French, who had been employing the wheeled vehicle as an armored reconnaissance platform since the 1980s, Ukraine will use the AMX-10 RC as an anti-tank system in the front lines of Eastern Europe. Although this may appear to go against the nature of the platform, given its light armor, the powerful 105mm main gun of the AMX-10 RC is more than capable of destroying a heavily armored vehicle. It carries a gun of similar capabilities to those mounted on the successful German Leopard 1 main battle tank. With the effective use of heat, high-explosive rounds, and armor-piercing, fin-stabilized, discarding sabot rounds, the AMX-10 RC can rain havoc on Russian armored columns. Some sources have pointed out the Ukrainian military will receive the improved 10 RCR variant, with enhanced armor and a fire control system to bolster the survivability of the four-man crew. In March 2023, multiple videos of Ukrainian military personnel inspecting several AMX-10 RC vehicles emerged. Some footage was published on Twitter by user Nalcio26, an independent military analyst who has been closely monitoring the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The clips show Ukrainian troops inspecting the wheeled vehicle and taking pictures aboard it. Other videos focus on the reconnaissance vehicle during trials. Although the delivery of the AMX-10 RCR has bolstered Ukrainian morale, it has resulted in some controversy regarding how Ukraine and France have marketed the introduction of the vehicle to the ongoing war in Eastern Europe. For instance, some media outlets, including government agencies, have marketed the AMX-10 RCR as a light tank, when it is, in fact, a wheeled vehicle. Indeed, the French military has officially designated the AMX-10 RCR as a char, or light tank, in the past century. Nevertheless, the acronym RC stands for Rouge Canon, which literally means wheeled gun. Other specialists have also noted the AMX-10 RCR is a wheeled and not a tracked vehicle, with light armor that, despite its latest upgrade, only provides protection against small arms fire and light explosives. Whichever the case, the delivery of these French vehicles to Ukraine accelerated the American and German decision to provide the Eastern European country with M2 Bradley and Marder infantry vehicles and Leopard 2 tanks. As the 21st century dawned, the Challenger 2 main battle tank, with its powerful L30A1 120mm rifled gun and advanced defensive armor, stood as a pinnacle of British military engineering. Proven in diverse terrains, from the Balkans to the Middle East, it had exclusively served British forces. Yet, as it entered the fray of a new theater of war in the late summer of 2023, its destiny took an unexpected turn. In Ukraine, the Challenger 2, now a source of fascination and pride for Ukrainian forces, faced a critical test. Trained rigorously by the British, these new operators had quickly developed a deep respect for the tank's capabilities. As they maneuvered it through the unpredictable battlefield, they relished the power at their fingertips. But in the chaos of war, the tank struck a hidden mine and was suddenly immobilized. At this moment, it became starkly vulnerable. An enemy, seizing the opportunity, eyed this machine's newfound weakness, threatening to taint Challenger 2's impressive record. In 1998, the Challenger 2 main battle tank entered service with the United Kingdom. Developed by Vickers Defense Systems, the tank responded to the British Army's need for a successor to the Challenger 1. The new vehicle's development focused on incorporating cutting-edge technology and a robust armor system, reflecting the lessons learned from earlier tank models and Cold War-era combat experiences. One of the most outstanding features of the Challenger 2 is its exceptional level of protection. It's equipped with second-generation Dorchester armor. This advanced composite armor, combined with a specially designed turret, provides unparalleled defense against kinetic and chemical energy projectiles. But despite being one of the most protected tanks in the world, the Challenger 2 is not without vulnerabilities. Because British Army doctrine at the time asked its tankers to fight defensively while dug in, tank designers applied some of the thinnest protection to the lower front hull, known as the glacis, which would be underground when the tank fought from behind a revetment. However, in the 30 years since the Challenger 2 entered service, the British Army has added bolt-on armor to the glacis. British tanks are famous for their unparalleled long-range firepower. In 1991, a Challenger 1 fired its 120mm rifled gun from a distance of 3.2 miles and knocked out an Iraqi T-55, breaking a record for tank-on-tank gunnery that still stands. With a superior L-30A1 120mm rifled gun and better optics and fire control than its predecessor, the Challenger 2 should be able to fire even farther. Two 7.62mm L-94A1 EX-34 chain guns supplement this firepower. The Challenger 2 first serviced the British Army in 2000 when deployed in Bosnia and Kosovo, primarily involved in peacekeeping operations. While Vickers Defense Systems had grand plans for the Challenger 2, including worldwide export, the end of the Cold War led to less developed tanks than initially thought. The last of nearly 400 created was delivered in 2002. But it was in the Iraq War when the main battle tank showed its true firepower, particularly during Operation Enduring Freedom. For their work in the desert, Challenger 2 tanks were equipped with sand filters and did not venture deep into urban areas due to a lack of urban combat equipment. Right from the start, the tank demonstrated unparalleled capability in exerting extreme pressure on the enemy, compelling them to retreat in the face of its swift advances. Deployed by the 7th Armored Brigade of the 1st Armored Division, during the siege, a total of 120 Challenger 2 tanks provided fire support to the British forces around Basra, knocking out Iraqi tanks, mainly T-54s and 55s. During one fierce urban battle, a Challenger 2 tank faced an assault from irregular forces armed with machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades. In the initial surprise attack, the tank's driver experienced impaired visibility. While trying to maneuver the tank in reverse as directed by the commander, the other optical systems also became compromised, causing the tank to lose traction and end up in a ditch. Fortunately, the crew remained unharmed inside the well-armored tank until it was recovered for repairs, with the sighting equipment taking the most significant damage. The tank was fully operational again within 6 hours. The Challenger 2 tanks did not suffer any losses from enemy fire. The only tank lost was due to an unfortunate incident of friendly fire. Subsequently, the tanks were assigned to less prominent non-combat roles. Following the 2020 reorganization of the Army, there are only 3 remaining Challenger 2 tank regiments: the Queen's Royal Hussars, the King's Royal Hussars, and the Royal Tank Regiment, each serving as the tank regiment of an armored infantry brigade. Additionally, a single Army Reserve Regiment trains reservist Challenger crews. However, a resurgent conflict would bring this tank to the Eastern European front lines for the very first time. When Russia invaded Ukraine in spring 2022, the latter quickly ran for aid from several nations, including the United Kingdom, a known warfare powerhouse. One of the specific requests in their aid package, in addition to self-propelled guns and armored repair and recovery vehicles, was for Challenger 2 tanks. Initially, then Prime Minister Boris Johnson declined the proposal, with British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace publicly stating that such an idea would not work. However, things changed in early January 2023, when, in light of the developing situation, the British government confirmed an initial supply of 14 Challenger 2 tanks to the beleaguered nation. A spokesperson for the new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, ratified this decision, which was a reflection of, quote, the United Kingdom's ambition to intensify support. Late that month, a group of Ukrainian troops traveled to the United Kingdom to begin training with British soldiers from the Royal Tank Regiment and the Queen's Royal Hussars. The British Army trainers spent several weeks training Ukrainian personnel from the powerhouse 82nd Air Assault Brigade, teaching them how to command, drive, and work together to fight with the tank. Even Sunak himself and Ukrainian President Zelensky visited the soldiers at their training camp, where the two ratified their collaboration and affirmed that their use of the tank marks a step up in the Ukrainian forces' capabilities and ensures that the most modern and sophisticated gunnery systems in the world allow them to protect their crews during battle. By late March, the trainees were ready. That month, the Ukrainians' first Western main battle tanks arrived in the country. In addition to other donations of Western-manufactured infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and self-propelled artillery. With the arrival, Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov assured, quote, these fantastic machines will soon begin their combat missions. The Ukrainian 82nd Air Assault Brigade, the sole user of the 14 tanks, is an offensive brigade. At the time of training, it was ready to attack the south, an area crucial in the conflict due to its strategic location and the presence of key cities and infrastructure. For months, this area had seen intense fighting as Ukrainian forces attempted to reclaim territories occupied by Russian troops. In mid-August, the 82nd Brigade attempted to liberate the Robotny village in the country's long-awaited southern counteroffensive. Rolling into battle north of Robotny, a critical Russian strongpoint on a 50-mile-long axis towards occupied Melitopol, the 82nd joined the fight, quickly making a difference and giving the Ukrainian Southern Command the momentum needed to liberate the village a week later. But this win was also partly due to a crucial modification to these tanks. Despite the marvelous technology of their state-of-the-art tanks, in keeping with their known liking for changing technology to suit their needs, these new Ukrainian Challenger 2s also have their own twist. Despite Glacis armor updates with the British Challenger 2s, the Ukrainian tanks came without it. So, before being deployed to the field, the Ukrainian military improvised. In early September, photographs and videos were posted by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, including a video featuring an 82nd Brigade tanker. Analysts and warfare aficionados quickly noticed a unique change. The Ukrainian army had added protection on the lower front of the 69-ton tank. This new Glacis protection is clearly meant to protect one of the tank's notorious weak spots from tandem warheads, like that on the Russian Army's Comet anti-tank missile. Other photographs of the tanks also suggest a top-mounted slat armor, similar to those found on Russian vehicles used in the conflict, primarily meant to protect from UAV attacks. From the get-go, there was no doubt the Ukrainians loved their new rides. Proud of their creation, and following their win in South Ukraine, the armed forces released a video of a tank soldier praising the Challenger 2, describing it as more resilient than Soviet equivalents. In a short documentary produced by the United Kingdom Defense Ministry, one air assault tanker described his new vehicle as a diamond as well as a beast. Another tanker, recorded while standing next to his 4-person 69-ton Challenger 2, stated that, quote, "This tank is like a sniper rifle." However, this excessive pride would dissipate barely a week later. Mere days after the Ukrainian Defense Ministry highlighted the tank's capabilities in a video interview, a Challenger 2, shifting positions from outside Robotny to outside Verbova, struck a mine. Knowing that their immobilized tank had become an easy target, the Ukrainian crew quickly bailed out, and moments later, a powerful Russian Comet anti-tank missile struck the precious vehicle. The tank might have survived if the Comet had struck the immobile tank on its reinforced Glacis. However, the missile's operators hit the vehicle in another weak spot, and the missile's tandem warhead exploded slightly above the tank's turret, where the armor was also thin and there wasn't any additive armor. As the missile found its mark, it ignited a devastating blaze that rapidly engulfed the Challenger 2. Within moments, the intense heat reached the ammunition charges, stored in their specially designed containers. These chambers, usually filled with water to forestall any secondary explosions, were meant to be the tank's last line of defense in such situations. In the chaos of the strike, they could not withstand the ferocious heat that overwhelmed their protective design, leading to a catastrophic failure and a partially dislodged turret from the tank's hull. It was official. The Ukrainian armed forces had lost their first Challenger 2 tank, and with it, the first ever Challenger 2 loss by enemy fire in its 25 years of deployment. While the photograph of a lonesome burned Ukrainian Challenger 2 tank in Robotny may be a symbol of defeat, it also comes with a silver lining. After this loss, the Russians knew how to take down Challenger 2, immobilize it, and hit it from above. According to one crewman of a T-90 tank, in a state media statement, they are trained in how to fight the Ukrainian Challenger 2s. Quote, "We are 100% ready. We have studied the technological characteristics of these machines, where they could be struck." But this valuable lesson cuts both ways. Now, in addition to knowing about the vulnerable Glacis, the Ukrainians know about another, the turret top. The Ukrainians also clearly know where to strike a T-90 with the Challenger 2's powerful gun that some have described as sniper-like. The story of the Challenger 2 main battle tank is still being written. Currently, the United Kingdom has 213 remaining Challenger 2 tanks and is in the process of developing Challenger 3, which is set to gradually replace its predecessor beginning in 2027. So, to some, the initial delivery of 14 Challenger 2 tanks may only be the beginning of a new main battle tank friendship. This would be a very valuable addition to the Ukrainian arsenal. In the Challenger 2 documentary, one of the tankers stated that, quote, "A few more companies for our country would be quite good if used correctly." The PT-91 has its roots in the Soviet-era T-72 main battle tank, but the upgraded and more capable Twardy was actually developed by the Poles. Shortly before the USSR fell apart, the Polish military was in the process of modernizing its equipment. But with the dissolution of the communist giant, the nation was left with no option but to continue independently. Using old but reliable Soviet technologies, as well as experimental programs of their own, the Polish eventually came up with an improved version of a Soviet main battle tank with enhanced mobility, armor, and firepower. Ironically, the Twardy would later be deployed to combat the remnants of the same regime it was initially designed to fight alongside. During the Cold War, Poland was one of 3 countries that manufactured the Soviet T-72 main battle tank. The other countries were the USSR and Czechoslovakia. However, the Polish version of the tank had subtle yet significant differences that made it a machine of its own. At first, Poland produced several hundred T-72M M1 tanks for export. However, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the nation needed to modernize its own fleet. Fortunately, the country had the industrial capacity to do it independently, and as part of this modernization effort, a purely Polish program was initiated, resulting in the PT-91 tank. In the 1980s, Poland successfully modernized their obsolete T-55, resulting in the 55AM Merida. The successful enterprise convinced the General Staff that this kind of effort was viable. As such, the Polish decided to radically update the T-72M1 in 1988. While the local T-72M1 was based on the T-72A, it had been upgraded with a 16mm additional glacis plate, and later became known as the T-72M1K, or T-72M1D in the Polish Army. Even so, the project had a slow start, and it was soon decided that it would be more viable to purchase the latest Soviet T-72S, or T-80. However, the dissolution of the Soviet bloc changed their plans, and the project acquired renewed dynamism. For the most part, the Polish drew experience from the vastly superior T-72M Wilk, or Wolf, a domestically produced iteration dating back to 1986, but not unveiled until 1989. The Wolf was equipped with either a Czech-built Kladivo FCS or a Polish Merida, and was fitted with a Radomka illumination-free night vision sight, an LAS Varda night sight, and an Obra laser illumination warning system, in addition to banks of Tellur smoke dischargers, and an active protection made of the local Irawa 1-2 system. Although the Wilk project only produced a few experimental vehicles, it created a network of local suppliers that proved helpful in future projects. The study for the Polish-designed PT-91 began immediately after the fall of the USSR. In July of 1991, the newly constituted OPRM Design Bureau, which stands for Research and Development Center for Mechanical Appliances, was chosen to lead the project. Moreover, the project was executed by the Bumar Wabendi factory, which had prior experience producing T-72s under license. The designers and engineers gathered all the knowledge and experience they had from the cancelled Wilk project, and almost every critical component was modified in some way, except for the original construction hull. That part retained the characteristic glacis plate of the Wolf. In addition, the new development heavily capitalized on many features of the older model, such as the drivetrain and suspension units. In 1992, the Bumar Group, a military consortium, delivered the first prototype, paving the way for a pre-series of no less than 20 units to be delivered the following year. Meanwhile, the General Staff pointed out several deficiencies of the T-72M without any complacency towards Western tanks. Among the most noticeable shortcomings were its limited mobility and insufficient armor, as well as primitive fire control and night vision systems. Furthermore, the tank had poor accuracy due to the mediocre stabilization system of its main gun. The manufacturer eventually addressed the tank's issues and enhanced its armor protection, fire control system, and engine, as well as the gun stabilization system. Thus was born the Twardy, meaning tough or resilient. To increase mobility, the Twardy was equipped with a Polish-built PZL Wola S12U diesel engine that provided 850 horsepower. Unlike the original power plant, the new engine featured new fuel and air injection systems, which allowed for a weight of 18.5 horsepower per ton. Moreover, it was coupled with a manual transmission, and power was transferred through torsion bar suspensions. The tank had a ground clearance of 39 centimeters and a fuel capacity of up to 1,000 liters, allowing for an operational range of 650 to 700 kilometers, including the new extra fuel tanks. The maximum speed was established at 60 kilometers per hour on smooth terrain and up to 40 kilometers per hour on cross-country terrain. In terms of field performance, the Twardy could climb a 60% gradient and stay stable on a 50% side slope. What's more, it could climb a vertical step of 85 centimeters, gap a trench no wider than 2.8 meters, and ford 1.4 meters of water while unprepared, or up to 5 meters with full preparation and a snorkel mounted. Later on, the PT-91 received an enhanced 1,000 horsepower S1000 engine with a turbocharger to take it into the new century, increasing its top speed to roughly 75 kilometers per hour. And in terms of protection, the base was made of laminated, steel-welded, rolled homogeneous armor and composite front and side armor. The Twardy tank was armed with a 125mm smoothbore 2A46M main gun, which carried 42 rounds in its original Dolly Parton configuration, with an additional 22 rounds in a carousel. The gun was license-built in Poland and had an elevation of -6 to 13 degrees. The Polish-built autoloader increased the reloading speed, and the rate of fire was between 8 to 10 rounds a minute. The front, side, and top armor of the tank were enhanced with indigenously developed Irawa expensive reactor armor blocks, a total of 394 covering the front of the hull and turret, with virtually no gaps in between. Compared to Soviet-era tanks, the new blocks improved overall protection by 30 to 75%, depending on the ammunition used. The secondary armament consisted of a coaxial 7.62mm machine gun and a roof-mounted 12.7mm machine gun. For active protection, it was fitted with a dozen smoke grenade launchers and laser and thermal signature decoys, as well as a collective BNC system and a Halon 1301 fire suppression system. Inside, the Soviet systems were replaced by newer models made in Slovakia, such as the USDK electronic display and wind sensor detecting crosswinds, and the driver was provided with the passive night radomka sight. Other systems included the Drawa fire control system with a Polish PCD day sight, Israeli TES thermal elbow sight, Polish aiming sight POD-72, laser rangefinder, and PCO SSC-1 Obra-1 laser warning system. The PT-91 entered service in 1995, and a total of 285 examples were built up to 2009. In addition, many local components served to modernize several foreign main battle tanks, namely the Czech T-72 M4CZ, the Georgian T-72 Sim-1, and the Indian T-72 Ajaya Mark II. In 2023, the PT-91 once again garnered worldwide attention when Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki announced that Poland would deliver 60 tanks to Ukraine to help repel the Russian invasion, with 30 of them being Twardys. The remaining tanks were upgraded Soviet-built T-72s. In addition to the tanks, Poland had promised to provide Ukraine with a batch of 14 German-built Leopard 2 tanks a month earlier, but the transfer was only recently officially approved by Berlin. Experts around the world have pointed out the irony that Poland, which was historically oppressed by Russia, created a better Soviet tank than they did and gave it to Ukraine to aid in their defense against Russian aggression.